The room is quiet, so quiet that even the softest thought seems loud. They sit there feeling the stillness press against the edges of the mind. It is not an emptiness that comforts, but one that makes the heart restless, like water waiting to move, but held in a cup too small to contain it. You can hear your own breathing, slow and uneven, as if it carries the weight of all the things left unsaid, all the things left undone. Have you ever noticed how silence can feel almost heavy, how it can make the moments stretch until they almost ache? They shift slightly, and the faint scrape of a foot against the floor echoes longer than it should. The room holds the sound, and yet it does not answer, it does not reassure, it does not demand. And perhaps that is why they feel so aware of themselves here, of every thought, every twitch of feeling, every tiny ripple of doubt or fear. Sometimes it is easier to see the world outside, to watch others move, to let life unfold somewhere else. But here, in the quiet, there is nothing to distract the heart from its own murmurs, nothing to hide behind. A question rises, soft and tentative. Why is the mind never still? Even in silence, even when the body is still, thoughts gather like wind-stirred leaves. Some are gentle, like small flickers of memory. Others press harder, heavy and urgent, insisting on being noticed. And they notice them. They notice every small tug of desire, every flicker of regret, every unspoken longing. Do we listen too closely or not closely enough when the world inside becomes louder than the world outside? The shadows stretch across the walls, quiet companions in the stillness. There is a rhythm here, though it is subtle, the soft rise and fall of the chest, the small creak of the floorboards, the faint rustle of something unseen. They sit among these quiet things and wonder why the mind is so often restless. Why do the thoughts not simply settle as the dust settles in a sunbeam? And yet, perhaps that is the way of it. Perhaps the mind is meant to stir, to question, to sift through the invisible layers of feeling that gather in the quiet spaces of life. They feel a tension deep within the chest, a small knot of unease that seems to grow in the stillness. It is not loud, not urgent, but persistent. It whispers without words. There is something to face here, something that cannot be ignored. The heart notices first, then the mind follows. And so they sit, observing themselves as if from a distance, watching the subtle rise and fall of worry and hope, of fear and longing. There is a strange comfort in this observation, even as it brings no immediate answers. To notice is to begin, and to begin is sometimes the quietest form of courage. A soft thought drifts in, almost unnoticed. What would happen if they simply stayed still? Not moving, not reacting, not seeking to escape, just sitting with the restless tide inside, letting it roll and ebb and shift, like a river that refuses to be tamed. Could the heart survive this kind of patience? Could the mind learn to breathe without rushing to fill every empty moment with words, with action, with impulse? Perhaps it could if only they stayed long enough to see. The air feels different now, heavier yet somehow gentle, as if the room itself is waiting for understanding, waiting for insight, waiting for something that cannot be forced or named. They breathe slowly, letting each inhale and exhale carry them deeper into the quiet, deeper into the unspoken corners of thought. There is no urgency here. There is no judgment. There is only the soft, enduring presence of being awake inside oneself, fully and without distraction. And then, somewhere in that stillness, a subtle shift occurs. Not a revelation, not a lightning strike of clarity, but a quiet acknowledgement that the restless heart and the wandering mind are both part of the same story. That in this silence, there is a chance to see the truth of their own inner landscape, to notice without acting, to feel without demanding, to simply be, and in being to understand that some answers come not in words or deeds, but in the patient attention given to the silent spaces of life. They sit there a little longer, letting the quiet settle around them like a gentle cloak. The tension softens, the knot loosens, And though the mind still stirs, it stirs differently now, less urgently, more like a gentle wind brushing against the surface of water. And in this simple, quiet observation, they begin to feel something they have not felt in a long time, a small, tender recognition of themselves, unshaken by expectation, untroubled by others, held steady only by the soft power of their own stillness. They feel it first as a faint stirring, almost too gentle to notice, a whisper in the chest, a soft insistence that something must be done, something must be taken, something must be reached for before it slips away. It is quiet at first, like a shadow brushing against the edge of thought, but it does not go unnoticed. They feel it there, hovering just beyond the conscious mind, and a part of them leans toward it without understanding why. Why do these small urgings feel so persuasive, so alive, when everything else in the room is still? It is strange how easily the mind can be drawn by these whispers. They are not loud, not demanding in a harsh way, but persistent, soft as the rustle of leaves in the dark. They carry a certain promise, though no one can name it fully. A promise that if only they reach, if only they act, the restlessness might fade, the knot might loosen, the shadow might lift. And yet, there is another voice, quieter still, that asks in its soft way, what is the cost of this movement? What must be given to grasp what is so easily promised? They sit with this question, and the whisper does not leave. It grows, not in noise, but in insistence, curling around every thought, brushing at every quiet space. Sometimes it comes as a flicker of desire, a small flame that warms and frightens at the same time. Sometimes it comes as a sense of urgency, a tide that urges movement without showing the shore. And they notice it all, the pull and the promise, the ease of giving in, the comfort of allowing action to sweep the stillness aside. The room seems to respond in its own subtle way. The shadows lengthen and shrink, the air feels heavier, as though even the quiet knows the stirrings of the mind. There is a tension that cannot be denied, a sense that something unseen is pressing softly but firmly, asking to be acknowledged. And they do acknowledge it, leaning into the sensation, letting themselves feel the tug without yet acting. How strange it is to realize that even in stillness, the mind moves so quickly, chasing after that which is not even fully present, following echoes of promises that may never be kept. They notice how easy it would be to follow the whisper. Just a small step, just a slight bending toward the impulse, and it would feel as though the restlessness might finally settle. Yet there is a subtle awareness, like a shadow at the edge of perception, that warns without words, that asks them to look carefully, to pause, to feel the weight of each choice before it takes form, and so they sit, suspended between desire and understanding, feeling the pull but not yet giving themselves to it, holding the quiet tension like a fragile vase in their hands. Sometimes the whisper seems almost kind, almost helpful. It speaks softly of relief, of escape, of ease. It paints a gentle picture of what could be, of what might come if they simply follow it. And yet, there is also a strange unease, a knowing that these promises are light and fleeting, like smoke drifting through a still room. Can they trust a whisper that never fully shows its face? Can they trust a hand that reaches in the dark without revealing itself? They feel the pulse of their own heart, quickening slightly as the pull grows stronger, and still they do not move. They breathe slowly, letting the whisper fill the spaces between their thoughts, noticing it without answering it. There is a kind of strange discipline in this, a quiet strength that comes not from action, but from patient attention, to feel without reacting, to see without touching, to hear without echoing. It is a practice in restraint, though they do not yet name it as such. And in this quiet watching they begin to notice something else. The whisper, persistent as it is, does not have the power it seemed to have when first it arrived. It is softer now, less certain, less insistent. The mind, once tempted to follow, begins to recognize the gentle limitations of the urge. It is no longer a command, only a suggestion, a shadow among shadows. And they sit with this knowledge, feeling both the tug of desire and the steady presence of their own inner stillness, learning in a subtle, almost invisible way that not all calls must be answered, not all movements must be made. The quiet stretches longer, holding them in its soft embrace. The whisper lingers, but it has changed. It is no longer a threat, nor a promise, nor a push. It is only a small companion, a quiet echo that reminds them of the choice to observe, to wait, to feel. And they feel a gentle satisfaction in this recognition, a soft understanding that the mind can stir without commanding, that impulses can exist without owning the heart, that even the softest whisper can be acknowledged and yet left untouched. They breathe again, slowly, feeling the subtle power of restraint settle like a warm light behind the ribs. The pull of desire is still there, but it no longer defines the space. The mind has begun to hold the whisper lightly, neither rejecting it nor following it blindly. And in this soft, reflective moment, they sense that a quiet mastery is forming, not in action, not in conquest, but in the gentle, patient awareness that to notice is to understand, and to wait is sometimes to be truly free. Even when they try to remain quiet, even when they choose stillness over words, the world does not always understand. Their silence is not always seen as calm or wise. Sometimes it is mistaken for weakness, for hesitation, for something lacking, and they feel it, like a small weight pressing from outside, even when the room around them is still. How strange it is that in the quiet there can still be noise made not of sound, but of judgment, of assumption, of expectation. They notice how easily others fill the empty spaces with their own stories. They see it in the way eyes glance and linger, in the small shift of posture, in the hushed whispers that seem to follow wherever they go. The silence they hold so carefully is interpreted as something else entirely, something they never meant it to be. Have you ever felt misunderstood, even when you do nothing wrong? Even when all you do is sit quietly with your own thoughts? There is a gentle sorrow in that, a quiet ache that seems to settle deep in the chest, and yet they do not respond immediately. They feel the tug of the instinct to explain, to defend, to make clear what they truly mean. It is tempting, this small urge to speak, to shape the perception of others, to smooth the rough edges of misunderstanding. But they notice something subtle within themselves, that the act of explaining can sometimes erode the very peace they are trying to preserve. Can the truth, once spoken, always find its proper place? Or does it scatter, like leaves in the wind, beyond the reach of the heart? They sit with the tension, observing the quiet stirrings of both the world and themselves. There is a strange intimacy in this misunderstanding, a sense that it reveals more about the mind of others than about their own choices. Still, it presses, soft but firm, a reminder that even the calmest heart can be weighed down by how it is seen. They feel a quiet frustration, yes, but it is different from anger. It is a slow, patient recognition of the distance between inner truth and outward perception, a gentle awareness that not everything they hold can be held by anyone else. Sometimes they wonder what it would feel like to be understood perfectly, to have every silence read as it was intended, every glance interpreted correctly. And yet, even in this wondering, there is a soft lesson forming, that the value of their calm does not depend on recognition, that understanding from others is not a requirement for peace. Can one truly hold themselves gently, even when the world presses harshly? Can one preserve the quiet center, even when others try to fill it with noise? They notice the small ways the world responds to misunderstanding. A smile that feels hesitant, a word that comes too soon, a shadow that lingers longer than it should. Each reaction is small, each judgment fleeting, yet together they form a kind of pressure that is almost tangible. And still they do not rise to it, do not meet every look with explanation, do not fill the space with speech. They simply observe. They feel the discomfort, yes, but they let it move around them, like wind through trees without disturbing the trunk at the center. There is a quiet courage in this, though it is not loud or declared. The courage is found in the refusal to be pulled into the world's assumptions, in the steady presence that does not shift because others misread it. How softly powerful this is, to sit unmoved in the face of misunderstanding, to hold the self intact while the world seeks to reshape it. They feel it now, a slow warmth spreading through the chest, a recognition that strength can exist quietly, unclaimed and undisturbed. And yet they are not untouched by it. The ache of being misunderstood is real, and they allow themselves to feel it fully. They let the small pricks of sorrow settle into the stillness, letting them be present without demanding action. How strange and subtle it is, this balance of feeling and restraint, of acknowledging the weight of the world while keeping the heart free. They sense that in this delicate tension, a quiet kind of wisdom grows, one that does not seek approval but does not collapse under scrutiny either. As they sit, a small clarity begins to emerge. Misunderstanding, they realize, is as much a reflection of others as it is a test of themselves. They cannot control the eyes that judge, the whispers that spread, the assumptions that form, but they can control the space within, the calm that holds their own heart steady. Realization is soft, almost imperceptible, but it carries a deep weight. To be misunderstood is inevitable. To lose oneself in reaction is optional. And so they breathe slowly, letting the quiet fill the spaces left by judgment and assumption. They feel the subtle relief of releasing the need to explain, the gentle power of sitting without reacting, the soft authority of their own inner observation. Misunderstanding will come and go as shadows pass across the walls of the room, but the stillness they carry is theirs alone, unshaken, held gently like a candle flame in a draughtless night. Alone in the quiet, they feel the weight of their own thoughts more clearly than ever before. The room seems to shrink around them, not in a harsh way, but gently, as if the walls themselves are leaning closer to listen. And in that closeness, there is a reflection that cannot be ignored. The mind turns inward, not with accusation, not with shame, but with a soft curiosity that has been growing like a small flame in the dark. What is it that stirs inside? What truths have been left unspoken even to themselves? They notice first the small things, the patterns of thought that repeat without reason, the impulses that whisper softly but persistently, the desires that seemed fleeting yet left marks on the heart. Each one is a ripple across the still pond of their mind. And as they observe these ripples, a subtle realization begins to form. They have not been as present with themselves as they believed. How often do we truly see our own hearts, rather than the reflection others offer us? How often do we allow ourselves to feel without immediately seeking a way to change it, to explain it, to escape it? The shadows in the room lengthen slowly as the day bends toward night. They notice them, not with fear, but with an almost tender awareness. The shadows are not different from the self. They move, they stretch, they shift. Yet they are always a part of the same room, and they begin to see themselves in the same way. All the impulses, the whispers, the restless stirrings of thought are simply part of their own presence. To deny them is to deny life itself, but to watch them without judgment is a kind of quiet liberation. A question rises softly, like the sound of water over stones. What have I been chasing, and why? They feel it more in the body than the mind. A low pulse of unease, a subtle tremor of regret. The impulses that once seemed urgent, the decisions made in haste or convenience, the small moments of weakness, they all appear now in the dim light of reflection, stretching long and thin like shadows across the floor. And yet, there is no harshness here, no need to punish, no demand for immediate correction, only observation, slow and steady, like a hand tracing the surface of a still lake. They breathe deeply, noticing how each inhale and exhale seems to carry the weight of recognition. What have I truly felt? What have I allowed myself to feel? And in asking, they realize how little of their own heart has been truly seen. How many small corners of feeling have been ignored, brushed aside, or silenced. The quiet brings all of it forward, not in anger, not in fear, but in the soft light of awareness. And with this awareness comes something gentle, something that feels like the first step toward understanding, the knowing that they are both the source and the witness of their own life. There is a small ache, a soft knot in the chest, as they consider the moments that could not be undone, the choices made before this stillness was found. And yet, the room holds them without judgment. The quiet does not scold or demand, it simply allows them to see. And in this allowing, they begin to understand the strange power of reflection, to look without interference, to notice without needing to act, to see the self as it is, unadorned and unshamed. There's a subtle strength in this, a quiet authority that comes not from control, but from understanding. They watch the mind as it moves, slow and deliberate now, like a river finding its natural course after a storm. Thoughts rise and fall, some gentle, some heavier, but none commanding the heart. And in this watching, they sense a shift. The whispers that once tugged at urgency now appear smaller, less insistent. They are visible, yes, but not overwhelming. And the heart feels a kind of release, a lightness that comes from seeing the self clearly, without needing to hide or explain. A FT question lingers. How long have I lived without noticing this? How long have I allowed my impulses to guide me while ignoring the quiet voice within? The answer is not important, not in this moment. What matters is the noticing itself, the gentle act of turning inward and observing what was always there. The room remains still, the shadows unchanged, but the heart has shifted, slow and steady, like the earth turning beneath a calm sky. And in this quiet, they feel the beginnings of something they have not felt for a long time. Not certainty, not victory, not triumph, but a gentle clarity, a subtle understanding that the self is both the question and the answer. That the restless impulses, the small regrets, the quiet ache of the heart, they are all part of the same story. And to see them, to acknowledge them softly, is to begin to live with a kind of quiet truth, the kind that does not shout, does not demand, but simply is, steady and unshakable in its gentle presence. There comes a moment when they notice a pause within themselves, a stillness that is not forced but natural, like the calm after a wind passes through a forest. The small urges, the quiet whispers of impulse, the subtle pull to act too quickly, they are still there, of course, but something has shifted. There is a space between the thought and the movement, a tiny but profound distance where choice can live. Have you ever felt such a space, where for the first time you realize you do not have to follow Eve? Wry pull of the heart. It begins softly, almost unnoticed, with a simple breath. One inhalation, one exhalation, long and steady, and they feel themselves separate from the urge to react. The mind wants to leap, the heart wants to answer, but they sit, observing both without judgment. And in this quiet watching, there is a strange kind of strength. It is not loud or visible, but it carries a weight that is almost tangible. They feel it in the chest, in the soft settling of tension, in the gentle alignment of thought and presence. They notice how easily they could have moved before, how tempting it was to respond to every small pressure, to meet the world's expectations with immediate action. And yet now, sitting quietly, they begin to understand something subtle. That power is not always in action. That sometimes the greatest strength lies in the refusal to be hurried, to be pulled by every little whisper that brushes against the heart. How softly this truth lands, how quietly it asserts itself like sunlight filtering through leaves, gentle yet insistent. The choice comes not as a loud declaration, but as a calm recognition they will not react this time. Not because they are avoiding the world, not because they are weak, but because they are learning the measure of their own heart. To hold silence, to withhold the immediate word or gesture is not emptiness, it is presence. It is an acknowledgement of the self, an honoring of the mind that thinks and the heart that feels. And they feel the subtle relief of this choice. The easing of tension that has long lived in the shoulders, in the chest, in the spaces between thoughts. They watch the impulses still flicker, still call softly from the edges of awareness, but they do not answer them. They let the thoughts exist without feeding them, like leaves floating on a calm pond. There is a strange satisfaction in this restraint, a quiet joy in realizing that not everything must be seized, not every small fire must be lit. How simple, and yet how profound, to know that the mind can move without the body, that the heart can feel without acting, that silence can carry a weight heavier than words. And in this quiet space they begin to notice the small tremors of peace that come from choosing patience. The tension in the chest softens, the knot in the stomach loosens, and the mind feels wider, freer, less crowded by urgency. What once seemed like emptiness now feels like room to breathe, room to notice, room to exist without immediate consequence. They feel a gentle pride, not the kind that shouts or demands recognition, but the kind that settles quietly into the bones, steady and enduring. There is also a subtle clarity in this silence. They begin to see the difference between impulse and intention, between fleeting desire and measured choice. They notice how many times in the past they have reacted too quickly, how often action was mistaken for understanding. And now they sit with the knowledge that response can wait, that strength can rest in observation, that the heart does not always need to answer immediately. A gentle power rises in them, not visible to the world, not announced with voice, but deeply rooted within. A question drifts softly through their awareness. What does it mean to hold the self steady when the world expects movement? And they feel the answer more than they think it. It means honoring the mind, respecting the heart, preserving the space where understanding can grow. It means knowing that silence is not absence, that stillness is not weakness, that restraint can carry more authority than force. They breathe again slowly, noticing how each exhale carries away a little of the old tension, a little of the restless pull to act without thought. And in this rhythm, in the gentle rise and fall of chest and thought, they begin to feel a quiet delight in their own presence. The choice to withhold, to wait, to observe, has become a soft anchor in the heart, something to return to when the world presses too heavily, when impulses whisper too loudly. And in this gentle, deliberate stillness, they feel the beginning of a subtle transformation. Not sudden, not dramatic, but a quiet recognition that true power often rests in the spaces between thought and action, in the moments when the heart and mind are fully present and yet do not immediately move. They sit with this understanding, allowing it to sink in, feeling the small but enduring strength of choosing silence over reaction, letting it settle softly into the bones, into the quiet spaces of the soul. In the stillness that follows, they begin to feel something subtle shift inside. The urges that once seemed urgent, the small pressures that once demanded a quick reply, now feel softer, almost distant. They notice how much space the heart and mind now have, a gentle room where thoughts can rise and fall without commanding the body. It is in this space, quiet and unassuming, that they begin to understand the power of restraint, the strength that grows not in movement, but in careful, patient attention. They feel the small ways the world brushes against them, the looks, the whispers, the soft expectations that once would have pressed upon the chest. And yet now, they do not bend to them. They do not respond with haste or tension. They simply notice, as if observing the wind through the branches of a tree, letting it move around them without disturbing the trunk at the center. Each moment of observation becomes a small act of strength, a quiet reinforcement of the inner ground that holds them steady. The mind begins to work differently. Where once leapt at every impulse, it now pauses. Where it once followed every flicker of desire, it now waits, considering, observing, weighing. They feel the subtle pride of this awareness, not as a bright flame to be shown to the world, but as a steady light that warms the quiet spaces of the heart. They realize that restraint is not merely the absence of action. It is a presence, a careful, deliberate engagement with life that is both gentle and firm, and they notice the small victories in this new way of being. The urge to speak harshly fades when they observe it. The pull to react quickly softens when they feel it fully, but do not follow it. Even the smallest provocations, which once would have tugged at the heart and mind like storms against a fragile shore, now seem less threatening. They are still there, yes, but their power has diminished. It is not the world that has changed, but the way they carry themselves within it. Sometimes the world does not notice this inner growth. That is not the point. They feel it in the small steadiness of their own breathing, the subtle alignment of heart and mind, the soft quiet that rests in the chest like a stone warmed by sunlight. The lessons of restraint, of waiting, of observing without immediate response, take root slowly, silently, and yet with a strength that is unshakable. How quietly powerful it is to build a life from patience rather than reaction, from reflection rather than impulse. They watch themselves and they begin to notice how each moment of withheld reaction shapes the next. One small pause leads to another. One gentle observation leads to another. And slowly, like a river finding its course through quiet valleys, the mind and heart begin to move together, not in haste, not in fear, but in a soft, steady rhythm that feels like the natural order of things. Each moment of restraint becomes a brick in a foundation that cannot be shaken by the winds outside. And yet this growth is not easy, nor is it without awareness of struggle. They feel the old impulses stir from time to time, familiar and insistent. But each time they notice without acting. Each time they observe without yielding. And in this repetition, in this gentle persistence, the inner power grows. It is not loud or visible, but it is there, steady and enduring, like the roots of a tree beneath the soil, unseen but holding everything above with quiet strength. A question rises softly in the mind. What does it mean to be truly strong? They sense the answer, though it comes slowly. Almost imperceptibly. Strength is not always in movement, not always in action, not always in the victory that others see. Sometimes strength is the quiet presence that endures, the patience that observes without rushing, the calm that holds itself steady while the world shifts around it. And they feel that presence now, subtle but firm, like a hand resting gently on the chest of the soul. They notice the way their own breath flows differently, slower, deeper, more deliberate. They feel the pulse of patience in the chest, the rhythm of careful observation in the mind. Even the small movements of the body seem lighter, freer, less hurried, as if the restraint they practice within has begun to shape the world around them in ways they cannot yet see. And this is enough. The quiet growth of inner strength does not need applause. It does not seek recognition. It exists simply because they have chosen it, quietly, steadily, again and again. And in this stillness, they feel the beginnings of a new understanding. That restraint is not denial, nor is it weakness. It is a quiet, deliberate shaping of the self, a soft but enduring cultivation of inner power. Each withheld reaction, each careful observation, each patient pause becomes a thread in the fabric of a heart that is stronger than impulse, steadier than circumstance, and quietly capable of withstanding whatever passes through the world. The storm of the mind has passed, though it was never loud. It was quiet, subtle, persistent in its way, like rain against the roof in the dark. And now, in the stillness that follows, they notice how much softer the heart feels. The tension that once pressed on the chest has eased, the pull of immediate reaction has loosened, and even the small worries that lingered at the edges of thought seem gentler now. How quietly the world can change when the self is held steady, when the mind and heart find their rhythm in patience rather than haste. They sit, breathing slowly, noticing each inhale and exhale. Each one carries a little more calm, a little more ease. The world outside may still stir, the shadows may still shift, but within there is a gentle certainty, a sense that the chaos has passed without leaving ruin behind. And they reflect on the journey to this meant, the whispers of impulse, the misunderstandings of others, the restless currents of thought that once seemed so urgent. How far they have come, not in the clamor of action, but in the quiet cultivation of presence. They notice how often the heart is surprised by stillness. Even now, in the calm, there is a soft recognition of the power that comes from waiting, from observing without answering, from holding the self intact when the world presses hard. They feel a gentle gratitude for the quiet strength that has grown, small and unnoticed, like a plant in the shade, unclaimed by the sun, but nourished steadily by the earth. Is this what it means to be truly at peace? They wonder softly, and in the question, there is no anxiety, only curiosity, a gentle reflection of the mind upon itself. The small disturbances of life still brush against them, as they always will. The subtle judgments, the quiet expectations, the things left unsaid, all of them are still present. But now they are no longer burdens. They pass over the heart as water flows over stone, shaping nothing but polishing the surface, leaving the deeper ground untouched. They realize that peace is not the absence of disturbance, but the presence of understanding, the gentle ability to let the world move while remaining unmoved within. They feel the pulse of their own endurance, steady and unshaken. The mistakes of the past, the impulsive movements, the times when the heart and mind were unaligned, all of it seems distant, softened by the quiet reflection of what has been learned. They do not dwell on it with regret, nor do they boast over it with pride. They simply notice it, as one might notice the river flowing past a stone, acknowledging both its power and its gentle inevitability. And in this noticing, there is a strange comfort, a quiet reassurance that the self has grown without anyone's applause, without the eyes of the world, simply through attention, patience, and care. They think of the choices made, the silences held, the moments when restraint felt like a burden rather than a gift. And now they see that those very moments were the shaping of their own strength. How soft and slow this shaping has been, almost invisible, yet undeniable in its effect. The mind feels lighter, the chest feels open, the small tremors of unease have settled into a rhythm that is calm and steady. They feel the quiet joy of having endured without being shaken, of having preserved the self when the tides of circumstance tried to pull it away. A question drifts softly into awareness. What is left when the world's pressures no longer disturb the heart? They feel the answer not in words, but in the gentle pulse of calm, in the steady rise and fall of breath, in the quiet awareness of the self as a presence, not a reaction. The answer is not loud, it does not demand attention, it does not seek to impress. It simply is. And in this simple being they sense a subtle fulfillment, a quiet resolution, a soft settling of the soul that feels more enduring than any outward victory. They notice the small pleasures of simply existing in this calm, the way the shadows shift without threatening, the way the air moves softly without pressing, the way the mind can wander without scattering. Each small sensation feels fuller, more vivid, as if the quiet has opened space for them to see, to feel, to notice without haste. And they allow themselves to sit in this space, unhurried, untroubled, simply present with the self they have shaped through patience, observation, and quiet restraint. There is no applause here, no recognition from outside, no sudden revelation or dramatic triumph. There is only the soft knowledge that they have survived the subtle storms of the heart, that they have found the gentle power of stillness, that they have learned the quiet art of enduring without reacting. And in this knowledge, they feel a gentle smile rise within, not a celebration, but a soft acknowledgement of the self as it has quietly become steady, patient, unshaken, and at peace. They breathe again, softly, feeling the slow rhythm of calm pulse through the chest. The world beyond may continue to stir, the shadows may continue to move, and yet they sit here, quietly certain, softly resilient, knowing that the storm has passed and that the calm within is theirs to keep, steady and enduring, like a still lake under the quiet light of the night. They feel it slowly, as if it has always been there, waiting to be noticed. A quiet respect for themselves, a gentle authority that does not shout or demand. It is soft, almost invisible, yet it rests deep in the chest, steady and enduring. They notice how it changes the way they sit, the way the breath flows, the way the mind moves through thought. There is no need to prove it, no need to announce it, no need to reach outward for recognition. The strength is already present, quietly held, quietly known. They breathe slowly, feeling the rise and fall of their chest like a gentle tide. Each breath carries with it the subtle awareness of their own worth, of the quiet power that comes from restraint, from observation, from simply being present with themselves. How often had they searched for this elsewhere, in approval, in words, in the fleeting attention of others, without realizing that it had always lived quietly within? And now, in this stillness, it emerges softly, like sunlight through mist, not forcing, not demanding, only being. The world beyond the room may still press, may still judge, may still misunderstand. That is not what matters here. What matters is the steady presence of the self, the small certainty that no whisper, no expectation, no subtle disturbance can shake what has been quietly built inside. They feel it as a warmth behind the ribs, a soft pulse of calm in the heart, a gentle alignment of thought and feeling. It is not pride, not arrogance, not display. It is simply the recognition of their own being. Gently, quietly, without distraction. And they notice how this respect transforms the smallest moments, the way they move, the way they notice their surroundings, the way they feel the pull of old impulses or old fears. It is all tempered now by the quiet authority of self-possession. There is no hurry, no anxiety, no need to act to prove anything. They can watch the world pass, observe it without attachment, and still feel the steady presence of themselves at the center of it. How quietly powerful it is to hold oneself this way, to carry the self without need for outside approval, to honor the heart with patient attention. They reflect on the journey that led here, the impulses that once tugged, the misunderstandings that pressed, the moments of restless thought and quiet discomfort. And they realize that each of these small trials, each subtle challenge has shaped them, has strengthened the quiet foundation of the self. The power they feel now is not sudden or flashy. It is the accumulation of small acts of patience, of restraint, of careful attention to the movement of the heart. It is gentle, but it is unshakable. The air in the room is still, carrying nothing but soft sounds, perhaps the faint rustle of a shadow, the soft settling of the body against the floor, the subtle rhythm of breath, and in this quiet they feel the fullness of inner respect. Not the respect that seeks to impress, but the respect that simply exists, that does not waver in the face of misunderstanding, that remains steady when the world shifts. It is the soft knowledge that they are enough, that they are steady, that they can meet themselves with gentle care and honest attention. A question rises softly, almost as a whisper. Is this what it feels like to be truly free? To feel the heart untroubled by others, to hold the mind steady even when the world moves quickly, to rest quietly in the awareness of one's own presence? And in the stillness, the answer comes not in words but in sensation. Yes. Yes. This is the freedom that was sought, the quiet strength that was longed for, not in action, not in conquest, not in the eyes of others, but in the gentle certainty of being fully present with oneself. They notice the subtle details now, the way the room feels softer, the way the shadows no longer press, the way the small stirrings of thought can rise and fall without forcing motion. Each breath feels fuller, each heartbeat steadier, each pause a reminder of the quiet power that rests in the chest. They sit, simply sitting, allowing themselves to feel the steady warmth of self-respect, allowing themselves to rest in the gentle authority of their own presence. And in this quiet, they begin to understand something timeless, that the true measure of strength is not in what is seen or heard, but in what is quietly held. That the calm, the patience, the gentle power of observing without reaction, of waiting without fear, of honoring the self without demand, these are the things that endure. They are soft, yet unshakable, subtle, yet unyielding, gentle, yet absolute. They breathe again softly, and in this final calm they feel the subtle joy of simply being. Not triumphant, not loud, not declared, only quiet, steady, certain. The self rests within itself, fully present, fully honored, fully at peace. And in this stillness there is nothing more to seek. The quiet strength, the inner respect, the soft authority, they are already here, as they always have been, gentle, enduring, and perfectly still. They sit quietly, and the room seems to breathe with them. There is no rush here, no demand, no need to act. Even the small whispers that once stirred the chest now move lightly, almost unnoticed, like shadows passing across the floor in soft light. And in this quiet they feel something gentle, a stillness that is neither empty nor forced, but deeply rooted, steady, unshakable. How strange it is, they think, that such calm can feel so powerful that silence can carry more weight than any movement or word. They notice the small details of the room, the subtle rise and fall of their own chest, the soft rhythm of thought moving like water through a narrow stream. It is in these quiet moments that the self becomes fully present, aware without urgency, alive without striving. And as they sit, a soft understanding grows that true strength is not measured by what is done or said, but by the steady presence that can hold itself intact when all else moves. Around it, they feel the pulse of the heart, slow and even, carrying with it the lessons of all the quiet moments that came before. The whispers of impulse, the pull to react, the moments of misunderstanding, the gentle cultivation of restraint, all of these have shaped something subtle but enduring inside. And now it rests there, quietly certain, like a stone warmed by the sun, unshaken by wind, unseen yet undeniable in its presence. A question drifts softly through the mind. What does it mean to be free of need, of expectation, of disturbance? And the answer comes not in words, but in the gentle sensation of the body, the quiet certainty of the heart. Freedom is not loud. Freedom is not declared. Freedom is the simple, patient knowing of one's own steadiness, the calm that does not depend on the world, the quiet presence that is enough unto itself. They notice how gently the mind moves now, slower, more deliberate. Thoughts arise and fall without urgency. Feelings flow without clinging, and even the small uncertainties seem lighter, softer, less pressing. There is a rhythm here, quiet and steady, like the slow turning of the earth beneath the night sky. And in this rhythm, they feel the comfort of being fully themselves, unshaken by expectation, untroubled by misunderstanding, held firmly in the presence of their own awareness. Even the old restlessness comes now as a faint echo, a shadow that passes but does not linger. They watch it without fear or judgment, and it fades naturally, absorbed into the quiet that fills the chest. How gently the self learns, how patiently the heart shapes itself when given only attention, observation, and care. The lessons of restraint, of patience, of careful inner watching. These have taken root slowly, invisibly, and yet they now form the soft, enduring strength that carries them through even the subtle storms that life presents. They feel the space within themselves widen, open, and unhurried. The chest feels lighter, the mind clearer, the heart steady. And in this widening, they sense the depth of what they have cultivated, not through movement or force, not through proof or display, but through quiet attention, through the gentle repetition of small acts of care, through the simple, patient choice to sit with themselves and watch. The strength they feel is subtle, yet absolute, gentle, yet unbreakable, soft, yet profound. A question drifts again, quietly. What remains when the self is fully present, fully held, fully seen by itself? And they realize the answer is already here. A steady calm that cannot be shaken, a soft light that does not falter, a gentle authority that rests in the chest like a quiet flame. They feel it in every breath, in every heartbeat, in every still thought that rises and falls without demand. It is not a triumph, not a victory, not a conclusion. It is simply being complete and whole in the quiet of the self. And in this being they feel a final subtle clarity. The world may continue to shift, the shadows may continue to move, the whispers of impulse may rise again, yet none of it can disturb what has been quietly shaped within. There is nothing more to prove, nothing more to seek, nothing more to demand. The calm, the restraint, the inner strength, all of it rests firmly, softly, unshakably. They sit with it, breathe with it, feel with it, and in this quiet presence they sense the timeless truth that the greatest power is the one that is quietly held, fully known, and peacefully kept inside. They let the stillness stretch around them, carrying nothing but the gentle warmth of self-possession. The breath flows slowly, the mind moves lightly, the heart rests steadily. And in this final quiet they feel the soft certainty of being complete, held within themselves, untroubled by the world, serene in the gentle authority of their own presence. There is nothing more to do. There is nowhere else to go. There is only this, calm, enduring, and perfectly still.